Um, I think I'm supposed to introduce you, Sam.
Okay.
So here we go. I'd like to welcome everyone to our first formal meeting of 2021. And we want to thank you all for signing in and joining us. Tonight, we have in attendance members from the South Plains, Texas Master Naturalist Group. Also, the Llano Estacado Audubon Society is represented, and the Lubbock Master Gardeners Association have members in attendance too. And so we welcome everyone. Since we're all kind of gearing up for the City Nature Challenge, our speaker this evening, Sam Kieschnick, is a master in iNaturalist. And we're going to draw upon him to help us understand the significance of utilizing iNat for citizen science, and how it's really important that each of us can play a minute part, maybe even a huge part, in keeping this ball floating through the sky. And we're very happy that you volunteered to speak with us. And I would like to throw a thank you to Lena for having the initiative to ask you and then putting all of this together. So thank you very much, Lena. And we look forward to you, Sam. Thank you. I've heard a lot about you. For everyone listening, if you would like to refer to Sam as Sam Biology, that's okay, because that's what he goes by on iNat. So without further ado, really, I mean, I could speak about the City Nature Challenge a little bit, but it's just we're gonna practice and do some bio blitzes in order to be a machine whenever it kicks off on April 30th. We have about 5 days, I think, to run around the county, the entire county, Lubbock County, and take pictures of and try to identify everything that we can see, animals, plants, just whatever, anything there. And then we have another 5 or 6 days in order to insert everything into iNat and get things approved and identified. And we're competing just basically with all cities across the world that do this. And so it's really pretty exciting. I was kind of an athlete growing up, and I like the competition, so I'm ready to get out there and get with it. So we really thank you so much, Sam, for coming in and speaking with us. And I would like to turn it over to you at this point, if you don't mind.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for letting me present to the group. Can you all hear me all right? Can you hear me? Oh, okay, I hope you can hear my voice. So I'm here in Dallas, Fort Worth, actually right here in Fort Worth right now in my living room, well, actually in my wife's fabric room. That's where the internet reception is the best. So I'm going to be talking to you tonight, as Matt was mentioning, about citizen science, and then also about this City Nature Challenge and how we can all participate in this global event. And we'll go over that. Just real quick, a little bit about myself. I work for Texas Parks and Wildlife. I am an urban wildlife biologist. So what that means is I work basically with the public and how the public interacts with wildlife. In some cases, part of my job involves getting people off the ledge when they see a coyote or a bobcat and they get their panties in a wad about it. Other parts of my job deal with city councils and park boards on how they can manage their land for wildlife and also for the people that care about wildlife. I am a graduate of Tarleton State University in Stephenville, Texas, which is about an hour or so southwest of Fort Worth. My professor, Russell Pfau, is going to be presenting to y'all. I did my thesis underneath Russell Pfau, and we studied the population genetics of gophers, which was very useful information. I use that almost daily when I'm talking to a city council. After that, I worked at BRIT, the Botanical Research Institute of Texas, as a botanist for a few years. I was also an adjunct professor of botany, zoology, and biology at Weatherford College, a small college here. And then I worked for the city of Fort Worth as a naturalist for the Fort Worth Nature Center. I worked for the city of Mansfield as a nature educator. And then now I'm lucky enough to be an urban wildlife biologist. So tonight I'm going to be talking about something that I am super passionate about. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. All right. I'm going to talk about something I am crazy passionate about, and that is citizen science or community science. And then I'll also talk about what the City Nature Challenge is and how we're all participating in it. But I'm going to start out with a question. And it's an interesting question, and I want you to think about it for a second. How many species of grasshoppers are there in Texas? Okay. How many species of grasshoppers are there in Texas? So if I'm reading your minds, you're probably thinking, okay, there's a green one, there's a brown one. I saw a green one with some brown on it, maybe a grayish one. So here's the question. How many species of grasshoppers are there in Texas? And I'm going to come back to this question in a little bit too. So far, we have documented almost 300 species of grasshoppers and crickets and katydids in the state of Texas. That's quite a bit. That's quite a few more than the green one, the brown one, and the brown with some green on it. So there's a lot of species of grasshoppers here. My wife and I have a very healthy relationship. That's what I keep telling myself. We have a healthy relationship. One of the things that we do, my wife is really into fabrics and quilting, and I will drive with her to a fabric store. I'll drop her off at the fabric store, and then I go to the ditch. I go to the ditch outside of the fabric store, and I will flip over logs and flip over rocks, and I will look for bugs. And it's kind of an interesting way to see where the fabric stores in Texas are, because you can see that's where a whole bunch of my observations are outside of it. And if it's a good fabric store, there will be a lot more observations in the ditch of that fabric store. Anyway, we were at a fabric store in Arlington. Arlington is between Dallas and Fort Worth. And it was a good fabric store, apparently. My wife was in there for quite a while. And I was flipping over logs, and I found this little bug, this little insect here, kind of an interesting little thing. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny little cricket. It's called Myrmecophilus is the genus name for it. Myrmeco meaning ant, Phyllis meaning loving. This is not my picture. Nest. It rolls around in the stink of the ants, in the smell of the ants, and then it eats their feces. That is what this cricket does. And what do the ants do? Well, it smells like one of them, so they simply accept it into their homes. This little tiny cricket was underneath a log outside of a fabric store in Arlington. And I'm watching the screen here so I can see many of your faces right now. With a show of hands, how many of you have heard of this cricket before? Anybody? I'm sorry. Is it okay? No, not seeing any hands there. Not seeing it. Most of us hadn't. And the truth is, I had not heard of this little cricket until I flipped over a log. I was looking at some ants, and I saw something that didn't look like an ant in it. So this little tiny cricket was one of the give or take 300 species of grasshoppers, crickets, and katydids in Texas. Who cares? Who cares? Would your life have been any different if you had known that this little cricket existed versus it not existing? Would it have made that much of a difference to to you? And this is what I struggle with, honestly. And I wrestle with this question a lot. And it is the word of relevancy. Does it matter? Who cares? Who cares about, and insert your favorite critter or plant or fungus here? Who cares about that? And you might say, well, I care about it, or I'm interested by it. Are other people interested by it or care about this thing? And as a master naturalist, some of you are master naturalists or just people that are really into nature, I'm sure that you can develop an argument about biodiversity being important, that the greater the biodiversity means the healthier the ecosystem. The healthier the ecosystem means the cleaner air and the cleaner water and all that sort of stuff, the ecosystem functions of biodiversity. But honestly, who cares about any of that? What is the relevancy of what we maybe care about? And that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And it's something, honestly, that I wrestle with a lot. And I hope that you wrestle with it some too. Citizen science or community science is this cyclic pattern right here. And I'm going to briefly talk about it, but I'm going to go back into it a lot during my presentation. We start with a naturalist. Read that as master naturalist, read that as master gardener, read that as person outside of a fabric store in the ditch, read it as just a person that sees something interesting outside. He, she, or they make an observation of something. Maybe it's a horned lizard, or it's one of the 20-something species of birds that Matt was talking about earlier. Makes that observation and shares that observation with the community. The community read that as your friends, your family, your neighbors, strangers, whoever, shares that with the community. The community recognizes that it's pretty cool, or it's kind of interesting, or maybe even it's relevant. They care about that thing. That community starts to advocate for that. They advocate with their voices, with their actions. The land managers read city council, read park boards, read HOAs. They recognize the constituency of the community that are caring about that little cricket or that horned lizard or that habitat, whatever it might be. And they start to manage the habitat for that constituency and for those organisms that the constituency cares about. That management creates new land or manages habitat, creating new naturalists for more observations, and the cycle continues. This is what citizen science is, and this is how we too can participate in this for meaningful, relevant, important changes. And it is this citizen science, sometimes called community science, tomato, tomato, however you want to call it. Rose by any other name is still a rose. It's the involvement of the public in addressing questions. And for our purposes, these are mostly natural questions or questions about biology or ecology or bugs or plants or whatever it might be. There's all different forms of citizen science out there. Some of them look at the stars for light pollution. Some of them look at water quality, like the stream teams. Some of them even look at the flora and fauna in our gut. There's some weird ones where you can actually mail in stool samples to find out the floral gut stuff, which is weird. I don't know who's working the post office that day, but that's a bummer of a package probably to hold. Anyway, for our purposes, it's these natural questions that we want to address. And there's a few requirements, prerequisites, attributes that you need to be a citizen scientist. The first one, and this one is a true prerequisite, this is interest. All you really need to be a citizen scientist is interest. You don't need to be an expert in anything. If you're interested in whatever it is, that's all you need. That's the only prerequisite to being a citizen scientist is interest. And there's 4 actions that we want to do as a citizen scientist or community scientist. The first one, and I hope that we don't lose this as being master naturalists, sometimes when you grow up, you phase out of this for some silly reason. I don't know what it is. I joke that when I worked my previous job, I was working with kindergartners, and that really trained me to work for and with city council and city managers. That, you know, kindergartners and city managers, very, very similar. You got to jiggle your keys to get their attention sometimes. But the kindergartners were especially good with this. And this was exploring. So the first action is exploration. And if it means, you know, looking around when you flip over a log to be amazed and go, ooh, neat, there's a roly-poly, it's okay. It's fine to do that. But exploration is the first of the tasks, the actions to do as a citizen scientist. The second part, so if you just do the first one, that's fine. That's great. That's beautiful. Wonderful. But a citizen scientist goes a little bit further. He, she, or they record what they see. And this can be through a journal, reading the naturalists of old, their journals. It is amazing. It is beautiful to read some of those journals, the journals of Lindheimer, journals of Darwin, journals of Alfred Russel Wallace. These naturalists were just magnificent with not just their penmanship, but just their detail and how they wrote things out. It was so cool. We have different devices these days to record things. Some of them might be like a phone, a device like this, could be still the journal, could be online doing a journal post or a blog post or whatever. But recording what you see is the second action. And this one, I hope we never lose this one too. It's learning. So after you see something or observe something, you try to discover what it was, where it was, why it was there, what it was doing. For instance, that little cricket outside of that fabric store in Arlington, it was totally new to me. So I documented it, I recorded it, and then I started learning a little bit about it. So that's the third action as a citizen scientist. The fourth one, and this is where citizen science gets its power, is contribute. So you explore, you document, you learn, and then you contribute. You share what it is that you found, what you saw, what you observed with other people out there. This little map shows documentations of this bird. Anybody know the name of that bird? Real quick, and I'm watching chat here. Anybody know the name of that little bird? It gets up into your neck of the woods, I think. Hey, Charlotte, good to see you. It's a little bit more common out east where Charlotte's from originally. But this bird is called a dickcissel. Dickcissel is the name of this bird. Very good. I see it in chat now. And what the map is showing right here, and if you can't read it, apologies, but the time frame, it goes from January to April to June to September to December. So it shows where this bird is being observed in time and in space. And you can see this heat map sort of grow and then fade. What we're watching here is a lot of singular observations of this bird migrating. So one little observation in Lubbock County there in the Panhandle, it may not seem too important by itself, But when you combine it with all of these other observations, then you get a picture of what's out there, when it's there, and where it is. My favorite tool for citizen science is this. And to say that I'm bonkers about this is kind of an understatement. I am crazy, certifiably crazy about this tool. I'm going to get this tattooed somewhere on my body. I don't know where yet. I'm still thinking of like a lower back tattoo. That way, if I'm wearing a t-shirt, I'm outside and I bend over to make an observation, you'll see the tattoo. Maybe that would be fashionable, trendy. I don't know. But I am crazy about this tool. It's just a tool, but it's an amazing, amazing tool. iNaturalist, hopefully you've heard of it by now. It's really a lot of things. It's a lot of things. But on iNaturalist website, what they say it's this social network of people that enjoy nature, that share their observations with other people that enjoy nature, and help each other learn about what they're observing out there. It started as a master's project out of UC Berkeley in 2008, sort of with the rise of the social networks like Facebook and Twitter and all those sort of things. This developed. And now there's about 1.4 million folks that are using it around the globe, give or take 57 million observations or data points on it. Most in the United States, but it's international too. And it's really amazing where it is growing. One of the things that I like to do, especially on cold days, is I will look at dragonflies of Russia, or I will look at the beetles of Madagascar. I do that through iNaturalist. I go to see what other naturalists are observing around the world, and it's a pretty cool thing that's out there. I won't go too much into the weeds of it. And it's kind of funny when I'm asked to do a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation on iNaturalist. It's kind of like doing a PowerPoint presentation on baseball. I can show you all the rules of baseball. I can show you how to throw a baseball, how to hit a baseball. But really the best way to learn baseball, what is it? Of course, it's going out there and playing baseball. So it's kind of the same way with iNaturalist. The best way to learn it is simply by going out and playing with it. You can't break it. You can't break it. Or if you can break it, show us how you broke it. So don't worry about breaking it or anything like that. It can be frustrating, but just keep up with it. It's a fun tool to play with. The unit of iNaturalist is an observation. And an observation involves a person, the person making the observation. And I work for the state of Texas. I work for the government, so I can say this. If you have a device like this, we know where you are. We know where you are. And it's kind of a cool thing when it comes to data collection because you have your GPS built in right here. You have your location, your date, your time in there. So that's important with iNaturalist. So we have that little bit of data and then also evidence. So what it was that you saw, we'd like to know what it is, what it looks like. So you can add evidence by a sound file or by a photograph. And here's where it starts to get fun, is it's not just a picture, but it's also data. Matt mentioned earlier about the competition of being involved in something like this. And what's really neat with the competition like this or by iNaturalist itself is by yourself, it might not be too important, some of those little data points. But when you start to combine them with all of the others, you get cool pictures. Or you get cool pictures of what's out there, not just the pictures of the organisms. This little butterfly I observed there, and you can see the date, June 9th of 2016, and I was observing this at Cleburne State Park. So it put a dot on the map of where this species was in space and in time. I was working with a group of students, or as they're known in the college system as revenue units at Texas Christian University, TCU. And we were documenting the different things around campus. And this is one of the little things that we observed around campus. If you're not familiar with it, it's called a green anole or anole or anolis, depending on who you talk to. But a few of the students found this little lizard around campus. Congratulations. Well done. You found it. It exists there. Okay. Not too relevant or important, perhaps, by itself. But when we take a step back, we can see that it's seen, okay, it's been seen in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We'll take another step back. I've seen where it's seen in around Texas, not quite up to your neck of the woods in the Panhandle, although maybe some of you have seen this before out in Lubbock. But you can see where it's seen in some of these big urban areas. Now, some of you may think, maybe this is just a sample error, that this is just where people exist and people have the device, so maybe it's just that. And you're right, it could be. But when we take another step back, pretty soon we're seeing where this species exists in space and in time. I want you to look at this picture. Anything interesting about it? Do you see anything interesting about this? You're probably seeing, okay, this lizard is found in the southeast part of the United States, but wait, there's a few observations over in California, and man, these lizards went on a killer vacation in Hawaii. And you'd say, is this natural? Is this normal? Well, this little lizard is a native to Texas, but an invasive in Hawaii. Someone probably brought this lizard over either through plants or maybe through an animal cage, got bored with it as a pet, released it, and now we have populations of this lizard over in Hawaii and up or over in California too. You can see where a tool like this can become important. This is a beetle called emerald ash borer, and it was an 11-year-old kid that was playing with iNaturalist that observed a green beetle, a little green beetle in his backyard, and bam, that was a new species for Dallas-Fort Worth, for North Central Texas, for Texas outside a little bit of East Texas. So this is a tool that we use to see new invasions of species or new species in the area too. Now, iNaturalist is more than just an app, and I kind of cringe a little bit when people say iNaturalist app, because it's true, there is an app for iNaturalist, just as an app as there's an app for Facebook, there's an app for Twitter, there's an app for Gmail, there's an app for all sorts of stuff out there. But those are bigger things than just the app. The same thing is true with iNaturalist. However, there is an app for iNaturalist too. So if you have a smartphone like an Android or an iPhone and even a Windows phone too, you can have the app for it. It's a free app. And I didn't mention that earlier. It's a nonprofit organization out of California Academy of Sciences. It's funded by the National Science Foundation, by National Geographic, California Academy of Science, the museum there, and a couple other sources as well. Private donors give to it too. So it's a nonprofit organization, totally free app to play with. If you have an iPhone or an Android, that's really where it comes into play the best. So there's the recipe list on what to do, how to do it. But again, the best way to do it is simply like playing baseball, getting a ball and a glove and a bat or a stick and hitting it around. Not the app, the baseball. So you can see the little bits of list on how to do this. And I'll go over some of those just briefly. Again, don't want to get too much into the weeds of this. The first step for it, and this is honestly where I lose a lot of people, is that it requires a login. So you have to sign up for it. And you're probably going to say, oh, another username, another password to remember. Well, with this, you're not going to put in your social security or any sort of personal information. So you can be sort of lenient with your username and password on this too. And I'll mention in a little bit on how to obscure observations. If you don't want people knowing what's in your own backyard, you can obscure the locations of that too. But it does require a touch of information for the login. So you need a username, a password, and that's what you sign up with. So we'll get the app, we sign up with our username and password, and we want to go out and make observations. We click on the add observation, and this is where we add evidence, in this case, a photo evidence. So I took a picture of this lovely little plant. Don't call it a weed. It's not a weed. It's a beautiful, magnificent little plant there. I took a picture of it. A neat thing about this app too is you can add multiple pictures to each observation. And what can be frustrating sometimes is, especially with plants, and with some keys and some people that are observing them or identifying them, they'll say, well, you need to look at the underside of the leaf to count the hairs at the base of the veins to tell the difference. And you go, okay, well, I didn't get a picture of that. So it's a learning process. It's a learning process here, but making multiple pictures helps with that. You're adding better data, better evidence to help you with that. An important thing to mention is if it's a planted plant or if it's a cultivated plant, or if it's your pet dog, your pet cat, your pet lizard, whatever you have, you need to mark those as either being captive or cultivated. So very, very important. If you go to the botanic gardens or if you go to the aquarium and you make observations, mark those as cultivated or as captive. Super, super important. But you'll see with this data that I have the location. This was outside of my office at Cedar Hill State Park. This was a few years ago, October 18th, 2017 at that time. So we have a little bit of time and the place. Now, if it was in my backyard or if it was in a sensitive location where I don't want just Joe Schmo to know where this was, I can change the geo-privacy. And the geo-privacy with this one, I put it to open. It's in a public space and it's not a sensitive plant. So I keep that as open so they know exactly where that dot is. If it's a place that I don't want people knowing what's there, like my backyard, I can change this to obscured. And that randomizes the dot within, I think it's 10 kilometers. So it randomizes that dot so it keeps some of that privacy in place. For the what did I see, if I know what it was, if I know it's something like a plant or an animal or some broad category like that, you can put it as that. In this case, I knew it was an asteraceae or I knew it was a sunflower, so I could save it as that. And then it's waiting to upload there too. This is the part that honestly blows my mind. And the people that have created this, the folks there at iNaturalist, they've tried to explain to me how this works. And each time it goes right over my head. But there's a visual algorithm that this tool uses. And I'll give you an example of what it is. So I'll go outside. I will take a picture of what I see. And then I'll click on the what did I see view suggestions. And then it takes the picture of what I saw and it compares the pixels of that image to thousands, millions of other images. And it gives me suggestions on what it is that I saw. To me, this is mind-blowing. This is mind-blowing that it takes a picture and it gives me suggestions of what I saw. Now, keyword there is suggestions. It's not saying that it's definitely this. It's giving me suggestions based on the algorithm. And an important couple words to look for if you use this suggestion feature, there's one that says see nearby. And if you see that seen nearby, that gives you a little bit more evidence, a little bit more credence of what it might be. It may look super similar to a plant out in Russia or a plant in Hong Kong, but it's not going to have that scene nearby. So if you use this tool, be careful to look for the scene nearby. When I look at the visual suggestions of this plant, you can see the visual suggestion said, we think it's a trumpet vine, and we think it's the American trumpet vine, Campsis radicans. Exactly. You nailed it. That's it. However, when I look a little bit further down the list, it says that it might be poison oak. Now, part of me says, oh, you stupid computer, you're so stupid. It's not poison oak. But when I look at the picture, in that picture, I can see leaves of 3. So you can see where the visual algorithm thinks that it might be poison oak that I'm looking at. I mention all of this to say it's just a suggestion of what it might be. Now, after I upload it and after I save it to iNaturalist, that's when other folks like Lena, like me, like Charlotte are out there using this tool, and we'll come in and verify or say, oh, we think it's this, we think it might be something else. And maybe sometimes it takes a little while for that process. But other people come in and verify that human touch, verify it and say, yes, that this one is trumpet vine, or this one, isn't poison oak, and all that sort of stuff. The best way to get those verifications or visual suggestions is by taking multiple pictures. So this lovely plant that you can see in the distance right here, anybody know what it is? Anybody know what that is? Plant. I'll accept plant. And tree, maybe. Dicot. Yeah, that's about it. That's about as far as we can get with this photo here. It's a lovely photo off of my Windows screen. But plant is pretty much as far as we can get with this. So the best way to get a verification or identification of this is to get close to the plant, get closer to the critter. And I really like plants. I'm a plant guy at heart. Plants don't mind if you take pictures of them. They don't mind. They're pretty easy to sneak up on as well. So, multiple pictures of plants, that's a good thing. With this one, I grabbed a hold of one of those big old acorns, the big leaf, and I'm able to tell, this is bur oak or Quercus macrocarpa, macro meaning big, carpa meaning fruit. Big acorns on this plant. It's very important that we go out and find wild critters, wild plants. It's true that there are elephants in Dallas. Fort Worth has giraffes. We do, absolutely. But they're behind a cage, or they're in a cage. There is tremendous diversity at the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens, or at the local botanic gardens up there in the Panhandle too. Tremendous diversity, but that's all cultivated stuff. So what we really want to search for is the wild organisms, things like squirrels, weeds. These are important, interesting things out there, like our lovely henbit, which is probably blooming right now in your neck of the woods. Very, very important. And almost every time I go out into the field, I bring my hands with me. And with my hands comes a built-in scale. So I will put my hand behind the plant. It helps the camera focus on that too. I'll put my hand behind it if I'm grabbing a grasshopper or some bug that doesn't sting, or maybe it does sting. That's how I learn as well. With this top grasshopper, you can see that it's not 8 inches long. You can see it's just, that long in between my fingers. And it's true that my hands are different size than your hands, but it gives some idea of how large or small something is. If you're highfalutin, you can get a ruler and put a ruler next to it, or also a standard measurement like I have next to that bobcat track. I have a dollar bill next to that. Now, if you're really, really hardcore, you can do something that a friend of mine, Joey Santor, has done. He actually got it tattooed on his finger of a ruler. pretty hardcore. He's got a YouTube channel as well called Crime Pays, but Botany Doesn't. It's a great YouTube channel. However, be aware there are curse words on this. He's from Chicago originally, so he does say bad words. But he has a built-in scale with that tattoo on his middle finger there, which is a bummer because it's already fading a little bit and it's not as calibrated as it was when he first got it. So we might have to get touch-ups sometime soon. So this tool to me, and it's the reason that I am crazy about it, is I really consider it revolutionary. As naturalist, as conservationist, as environmentalist, sometimes we fear devices like this. And I'll maybe do a question to the group. How many times have you been out on a bird walk or out enjoying nature and you see everybody else glued to devices like this? Have you seen that before? And sometimes you'll shake your head and you'll go, kids these days, or something like that. The truth of the matter is these devices are staying with us. They're staying with us. So we can use a tool like this as a hook to get people outside, as a hook to get people to learn more about nature. So in my very biased opinion, it's a revolutionary tool. And yes, there's an app for it, but the website, the iNaturalist.org, this is where you can really go, engage with other folks, learn more about the dragonflies of Russia or the birds of Lubbock County or the grasshoppers of Lubbock County. I wonder how many grasshoppers have been documented in Lubbock County. You can learn about that on the website. So going to the website, exploring the different features of it too. So now let's talk about this global event called the City Nature Challenge, where people around the world, literally around the world, participate, compete, engage with nature together collectively. It started in 2016 between two California areas, Los Angeles and San Francisco. And there was a competition to see which area had the most naturalist, which area had the most biodiversity, and which area had the most observations. And this first year, Los Angeles won all three categories, had the most observations, the most species, and the most naturalist. In 2017, it became national. And this is when Texas was involved as well, 3 metro areas in Texas. So there were 16 cities or urban areas that participated in this. Dallas, Fort Worth. Dallas, Fort Worth had the most observations. We were able to destroy California's San Francisco and Los Angeles populations with our observations. So we did pretty good. Dallas, Fort Worth did. Houston, right there on the coast, had the most species in 2017. Los Angeles still had the most participants. So they had 1,000 folks that participated in 2017. In 2018, the rest of the world wanted to participate, and 68 cities partook in this. 17,000 observations, 17,000 people participated in it, almost 500,000 observations, 8,600 species, and quite a few rare species were documented during this 4-day period. I don't think I have the results in here. San Francisco won all 3 categories. So they were disappointed in being beaten by Los Angeles the first year and Texans the second year. So they came back strong in 2018. In 2019, there was 159 cities. And I do cities in quotes because this could mean county, this could mean a group of counties, this could mean an urban area, sort of a big circle on the map. So cities is loosely defined here. In 2019, 35,000 people participated in it. Almost 1 million observations were made. 31,000 species were documented in this. South Africa, Cape Town, went literally all out. They went crazy with it. They actually had teams of scientists that saw the gaps in the data, and they had like a lichenologist that went out and made observations of lichen. They had people combing the tide pools. They had shark observations. I mean, they went all out in 2019 for this. So it was fun. It was really cool to see those South African observations, but they went all out. San Francisco had the most participants as well. My neck of the woods here in Dallas, Fort Worth, I think we got like 4th or 5th as far as observations go, 36,000 observations. In Texas, we had 9 or 8 or 9 participating cities that were involved. Quite a bit of participation here in Texas. 3,000, 3,500, over 3,500 folks participated in this. Almost 100,000 observations. 6,000 species were documented in 4 days. So tremendous, amazing numbers there. I don't know how many of y'all remember last year, 2020. Boy, what are the history books going to say about the year 2020? I wonder what the history books are going to say about 2020. And when we were planning for the City Nature Challenge in January, we were excited. Everybody was excited about this. China was a little nervous about it already, but all of us were super excited about it. And then obviously, you know what happened in March, in April of 2020, May, and the rest of 2020. It was different. It was different. So we changed the outlook of what the City Nature Challenge was. And I say we, the people that planned this and that worked together with our own areas, we looked at it a little bit different. And we said, it's not really going to be a competition. It's going to be more of a collaboration. And still 244 cities took part in this collaboration. We didn't really have winners or losers on, well, we never have losers, but we didn't really have winners on this one. But you can see the numbers here. Almost 1 million observations, 32,000 species, 41,000 people participated. And some of the areas, and this was in April, areas like Italy, the participation that Rome had was people making observations of spiders inside their houses, people making observations of, little bugs in the corner of their apartments. So it was definitely different, but still people participated in it. There were some amazingly cool finds that folks shared. Some of them were new species for areas, like the hummingbird on the top left, a new species, or a new, for iNaturalist, picture of this. Whole bunch of different things. The one on the top right, depending on how you look at the picture, was a bobcat that ate a jackrabbit in Canada. The family was on quarantine, so they were just observing things from the backyard, and they saw this bobcat attack a jackrabbit. So it was a nice life lesson for those kids, I guess, for their jackrabbit and for the bobcat too. But cool observations that we got. So it's coming up again this year, 2021. Mark your calendars, April 30th through May 3rd. That's when any observation that you make is going to be shared with it. Well, I'll get to that in a second. There's going to be about 300 or so cities participating in it. There's still some question on if it will be a competition or a collaboration, and it's probably going to be a bit of a mix with that. I bet here in Texas, it's going to be a lot of our Texas cities competing. We'll be competing amongst ourselves, perhaps, or amongst us versus California. I don't know how it's going to look just yet, but these are the dates here. Lubbock is involved this year. So kudos to y'all. We will be participating, and I say we collectively, you guys are going to be competing, participating, engaging with this City Nature Challenge. So from April 30th of this year, give or take 77 days, April 30th to May 3rd, any observation that you make within Lubbock County, within those geographical borders of Lubbock County, is going to count for the City Nature Challenge. You don't have to join any project. You don't have to do anything extra besides just making the observation. Now, some people will make observations of birds and of really fast bugs or of far off critters. And you'd say, well, how did they do that with the app? And I do this through my camera. So if you have a camera, you can use your camera and take those pictures and upload them through the website. So you can definitely do that. If you do that, recognize you have to have them uploaded before the 7th, I think, before the 8th, before that next week, Friday. So you have those 4 days to make observations, and then you have until Friday of the next week to upload them and try your best to identify them and verify them and all that sort of stuff. But you guys are going to be participating. I'm super, super, super excited to see prairie dogs. We don't have many prairie dogs that make the City Nature Challenge. So that's going to be a really fun critter that you're going to represent through your observation. So you guys are going to be competing right down those dates, April 30th through May 3rd. They'll count. So we have this competition, we have this collaboration, however you want to use it or call it. How can you use this data? So how can you use all of those dots? And let me tell you something, and I'll say it in all honesty. And I say this as a Parks and Wildlife employee, as an urban wildlife biologist. I use your data. I use it. I use your data. Now, it's true, you might be making observations from Lubbock, and I'm down here in Dallas, Fort Worth. But I am using your data to show of the constituency of naturalists in Texas, that there are a lot of people in Texas that go to wildlife or wild areas to make observations, to engage with nature. One of the ways that you can use this is to show that there is a constituency of people out there, that there's a constituency of naturalists or nature lovers, people that engage with nature, and here is the evidence. You can document where high biodiversity is or low biodiversity for land management. You can generate local interest. Did you know about a cricket that rolls around in ant smell and eats ant turds? Maybe that generates some local interest. I would go to another presentation about a cricket that eats ant turds that smells like ants. I would go to that. So you could generate local interest on these things. You can give these tangible, credible bits of evidence on who cares about nature out there. And just for a brief moment, if you'll allow me, this is how we've used the data in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I hope that you could definitely use it in Lubbock as well. The first thing is making a field guide, and in particular, a digital field guide. The naturalist of the next generation are not going to get finger cuts on field guides as you and I did. They're not going to get finger cuts from the papers of field guides. It's just not going to happen. They will be using these sort of devices. So we can be fearful of that, or we can embrace it. And this tool is one way that we can create digital, you can refine them, refinable field guides of areas. So this is one of the field guides, the digital field guides of a little park out here in Weatherford, which is west of Fort Worth, that I helped create. So it gives the different plants that are found in Soldier Springs Park in Weatherford. So I have not just a plants of Texas, not just a plants of North Central Texas, but a plants of that park that I can do through iNaturalist. Where I used to work in Mansfield, we use this tool all the time to show where high biodiversity was and where low biodiversity was. We would use it to document invasive species populations in the park, so we know where to manage for those. We would show what the areas where certain people would go to different spots of the park through this tool. So we used it for land management. A little local high school up here had some land right next to it that the school and some other entities were thinking about developing. The high schoolers, these are high school kiddos, went out, made observations of the different plants around that area. They created a field guide of that area. They showed that to the city council, to the park board, to the school board, and it showed enough evidence that this was important to the students. And now this spot is not going to be developed, or it's going to be developed for the students that care about nature or for the school itself. So a really neat success story. Up in Rockwall, there was some land that was donated to the city, about 20 acres, so not a big piece of land. But one of the park board family members came to a bio blitz of the City Nature Challenge of 2016, had a great time, and said, "Hey, Sam, would you mind leading a little bio blitz out here at this new land that we got?" And in a few hours, we documented about 300 species there. Not extravagant species, things like poison ivy and ragweed and snails and bodark. So not super extravagant species, but over 300 species. We took this to city council, we took it to park board, and they said, we need to save this as a nature preserve. And now it's Pettinger Nature Preserve in Rockwall. So there are neat successes like this that have happened, that do happen with this. And all of it goes back to that original question of who cares? Is nature important? Is it relevant? Does it matter? And I can't give you the answer for it. Maybe it's a personal question. But as master naturalist, as naturalist in general, I think it's kind of our duty to show others that it is important, not just to us, but also to them. It is relevant, I think, to all of us. Nature is. And while I'm up on this philosophical pedestal, I'll mention that it's pretty dang cool that we share the planet with all of these species, that we share the planet with a little cricket outside of a fabric store that lives its life in an ant bed, that we share the planet with a critter like that, and we share the planet with a feather-legged fly, with a dahlia, with the painted bunting, with a gray hair streak, with all of these different species. And I think iNaturalist, or citizen science in general, is a great tool that we can use to share that excitement, but also that realization that we share the planet with a lot of cool critters out there. So with that, I would love to address any questions, any comments. Real quick, if you're scared to ask me online here, there is my user, or there's my email address, sam.kieschnick@tpwd.texas.gov. Literally the longest email that I could get. They gave it to me. But I'm also on iNaturalist, and my username, and it's probably going to be by my tattoo, is Sam Biology there. So I'm on iNaturalist quite a bit. I probably check that more than I do my work email. So send me a message there. I'm going to close this screen, and I'm going to stop sharing that and look at the discussion. Good. Got some good happiness about the City Nature Challenge. Rockwall, Christina, you're from there. Very good, very good. With that, I'll open it up for anybody that has any questions or comments or anything. If you have any pocket gopher questions, I'll address those now.
I do have a question. I've been doing iNaturalist about 9 months.
Great.
And mostly with birds. And so on our bird walk last weekend, I took a couple of dead weed pictures, the flower heads that were really cool looking. Yeah. And I put them in there and it came up with a whole bunch of stuff. And I had no clue. So I didn't enter them because I didn't know what to do with it. So what should us novices do in that situation?
Great question. Love that question. And I'll actually use an example from just a few days ago. I saw a picture on iNaturalist that was posted, and it was this fluff of white stuff on the ground. And I thought at first, this is a slime mold. Someone else came on there and said, no, it's a fungus, not a slime mold. Someone else came on there and said, that's a tissue paper. That's a weathered tissue paper on there. And it shows what's going on here. When I make an observation of something, and the person that observed it, they put it as nothing because they had no idea what it was. And that's okay. It is okay if you're out and you observe like a dead plant, the flower head of a dead plant, but you have no idea, no clue what it is. That's okay. And also join the club. Thank you for your honesty. And if we're being honest with each other, when we're outside, the most unasked questions that we have internally is, what is that? What is this? And we're all asking that question. So if you see something and you have no idea what it is, but you know it's a plant, if you put it in by that broad category of plant, that narrows it down at least a little bit to maybe the people that are subscribed to the plants of the Panhandle or the plants of Texas. That's one of my subscriptions. I look at the plants of Texas. So just by adding it as a broad identification of plants is probably better than if all the suggestions, if none of them say seen nearby. If none of them say seen nearby, then it's probably not one of the suggestions there too. But if you know it's a plant, that broad identification of plants is still useful. Does that make sense? Did I address that question, Nancy?
You did. So you have to put something in there, right?
No, you can leave it blank. You can leave it totally blank, like with the tissue paper or slime mold that I dealt with from a few days ago. The observer put that as blank because they had no freaking clue what it was. And I think they even said, is this animal droppings? Well, sort of with tissue paper, sort of it's animal droppings. Yeah, so they didn't enter it in as anything. They left it blank just for whomever to put in there. Now, I have noticed that sometimes when you leave it blank, totally blank, there are some people on iNaturalist that help modify the unknowns, and they may give it the broad identification as plant. So if you put up a feather of a bird and you give it no identification, you might get an identification of bird. And you'll say, thanks a lot, jerk. I know it's a bird. But it's just a person on there that's trying to put it as a little bit of a narrower observation or identification than nothing.
So the helpful hint was that seen nearby. I had not noticed that on the options. And so that'll be something that I'll look for going forward. So
Absolutely.
Thank
you. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that one of the suggestions wasn't right and it just didn't have a scene nearby. The scene nearby means, has it been a research grade observation within, I think for the sake of Lubbock County, within that Panhandle region in the last year or something like that. There's all these different algorithms that they use to measure that. But if you don't see the scene nearby, be extra cautious with it.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Nancy. Good question. Yes, Arla, I saw that finger go up.
what was the name of the app to download?
Sure. Let me show off my tattoo real quick. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
It's called iNaturalist. So
Okay.
I like the letter, and then naturalist like the name. So iNaturalist, and the website is iNaturalist.org, O-R-G. So if you want to look at how to send messages to folks, I saw that as one of the questions. If you look at how to send messages, you can't really do that through the app. The app is good for collecting data, but really to look at the data, to engage with others, to send messages, all that sort of stuff, the website is really where you need to go. iNaturalist.org is really where you need to go. And you use the same login and all that information as you use for the app. Anybody else have any other questions, comments?
I have a question.
Sure, Lena. What's your favorite thing about pocket gophers?
I haven't learned it yet.
Oh, there's so much. There's
Yeah.
so much. Yeah. Yes, your question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So in terms of City Nature Challenge, it's held in April every year. Yet I'm from up north and it's still covered in snow up north. Like, so do they have any plans to normalize it or have it held a few times a year?
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything?
Great question. And our Canadian friends were very politely asking this on all of the conference calls. What the heck are we doing in April? Because we're digging out the snow up here. And yes, it has been something that we've had a lot of discussions with the people that participate in it. I think since it has been standardized as kind of a late April thing, that it will continue to be that. However, there are a lot of other events that go on. For instance, we here in the North Central Texas area, the 6 Master Naturalist chapters down here, we have our own competition in September, a fall competition of which Master Naturalist chapter can have the most observations and do their own little City Nature Challenge here. So in some areas, they do the same sort of thing. Canada, they have their September-ish competition up there. But with the Global City Nature Challenge, I think they're pretty fixed on this late April day, which is very true. It's kind of a bummer for, I mean, even y'all in the Panhandle, spring is not quite sprung up there, and you're still getting freezing temperatures perhaps in late April, early May. So it does make it a challenge. But I'll also mention that our Canadian participants still make observations. And they make observations of animal tracks or of animal evidence or of, dead, dormant plants. And these are still good pieces of evidence. But I hear you, totally hear you there with Lena, with that question, Lena. And it may be something that you want to throw the gauntlet over to your dear friends in Amarillo and say, hey, we played in this City Nature Challenge this time. We think we could take y'all on and have a competition in, September, late September or something, June.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Oh, what is July like in the Panhandle?
Pretty hot.
Yeah, right. It's kind of like what it is now.
Dry.
Yeah. Did that address your question, Lena?
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
It seems to me that if you had one in April and you have one in October, you have a 6-month spring. Because when it's 19 degrees in Lubbock, it's 100 degrees in Sydney, Australia. So
right. Yeah. And that was a good question, because when you look at all the cities around the world that are trying to pick the right date, it just became a real mess. So I think that's why they're kind of keeping the City Nature Challenge standard as this late April, early May date. And I predict it's going to stay that way. But again, some other areas are having their own City Nature Challenges. They're localized, they're regionalized City Nature Challenges on different dates too.
Well, if we get this first one by us and we're moderately successful, we'll be ready to take on Amarillo. No doubt.
Knock out Amarillo. No, Amarillo, they don't know how to do citizen science. I mean, come on.
Love it.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Would anyone mind if I asked one more question?
Please
Does anyone have anything? Okay. In terms of using City Nature Challenge as a global competition, do they have any plans to normalize the data based on some criterion like population? I mean, it's hard to compare Lubbock against other places because we're so much smaller.
Absolutely. So when we did it in 2019, there were winners in different categories. So they had like population per capita areas. They had the most observations per regional size, per population, per seasonality, all of these different metrics that they used to give their winners, you know, pats on the back. And that's the other thing that's kind of weird about all of this is you kind of don't win anything, but you also don't lose anything. And I would argue that even if you don't win over some other city, that you can still win with that data and use that data for the purposes of influencing city council members or helping with land management guidance and all that sort of stuff. And that's how we did it in Dallas Fort Worth. Even the years that we didn't win, my coworker and I and other organizations still used all of that data to give nature the big win. But yes, you know, it's hard for Lubbock to compete with San Francisco. That's going to be a challenge. If San Francisco has, you know, 1,500 people using iNaturalist and each person is making 1,500 observations, it's going to be hard to compete with that. So they do different metrics of geographic range, the region size, the population, and all that sort of stuff.
I have a question. I noticed that Duluth was one of the cities that competed. I've been to Duluth and I couldn't figure out if they had enough people to do that. But they have a lot of stuff to see up there.
Right. And, you know, it's been very interesting too. And with a lot of the observations, and I think that, was it last year or year before? No, it was year before, maybe the year before that. One of the years, the only species that was documented in each of the areas was the pigeon. The pigeon was documented in every single one of the areas around the world. So yeah, it's interesting to see, you know, what is considered biodiversity in different spots. So it's going to be fun to see, you know, what's coming out of Cape Town again, or out of Churchill, or wherever that might be, or Christchurch out of Australia, or wherever. It's going to be neat to see those different observations coming in. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time. I hope I didn't go too long. I went a little bit longer than I expected. But thank you so much. If you are a master naturalist or a master gardener, I'll also say this on behalf of the state of Texas. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for your dedication. We need you now more than ever. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean it in all sincerity. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
Very kind.
Thank you.
All right.
This has been a fantastic presentation. There's so much information presented in a way that's interesting. You know, sometimes I might get a little yawny in certain areas. You keep me on the front of my chair, and I thank you so much for that.
It was all that cricket that eats the ant turds that kept you on the edge of your seat, right?
That's it. That's it. And I'm going to ask about the favorite species of gopher the next time I see Russell.
Perfect.
I'll let you know how it comes out.
Good.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone. I would like to throw out a little note to John Wallace for making our involvement in the challenge possible. Thank you so much, and I hope that we do a fantastic job and represent the county and the city as we should. Thank you so much for that. Sam, thank you. Thank you. Sam, thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from you again. Okay, thank you, everyone. With that, everyone, be sure and put your hours in.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.